Shalom, guys. Welcome back to another episode here, Just Shav Youth Ministries with Casa Israel Yarah. Thank you again for being there. We're going to continue. We're back with Torah portion. We have two Torah portions this week. We're continuing the book of Vayikra, or the book of Leviticus, understanding how to draw near God and how to express our gratitude or our repentance, right? And learning to have that relationship. And so in the last couple of Torah portions, we understood how we can come to this tabernacle that we have been revealed from heaven and have been able to construct so that we can have a relationship with God and maintain his presence. And so we had the sacrifices and the offerings that basically by definitions are vehicles to draw near God. We learned of those people that are going to officiate in representation of us, the people, and representation of God to the people, which are the priests and the high priest. And so we have been understanding how important it is, detailed instruction of if we're going to bring anything to draw near God, how we're going to bring it, and how the priests are going to make sure that what is brought is correct and it is acceptable. And also we saw how the priests were going to be ordained, consecrated, and separated so that they are able to inaugurate this service. Okay, and so last week we finished with in Torah Portion Shemini, the 8th day, and we're found in the middle of a controversial situation where as we're inaugurating this tabernacle, this sacred space, Aaron's sons, the high priest, next in line, Nadab and Abihu, bring strange fire in disobedience to the commands and die in the camp, and so in the presence of God. And so we are stuck there, and then from there we jump into the purity laws, right? Purity, and what is purity to God? What does God consider clean and unclean? Which is interesting, right? Now, last week when it closed out with what is clean and unclean when it comes to food, right? Animals that could be eaten and not be eaten, right? And it's very important because this is God saying it. It's not men, it's not Jewish people, it's God. God is very clear on what is clean and unclean, what we can eat and what we cannot eat. But today we're not going to talk about that. I will probably link why we should not eat pork, video I uploaded a couple years ago as a reference. So you can probably talk review that. But today we're going to talk about or review and go over again Torah portion Tazria and Metzora. So like I said, this week's Torah portion is Tazria and Metzora. You can find these Leviticus 12 verse 1 to chapter 13 verse 59 for Tazria, and Leviticus 14 verse 1 through 15:33 for Metzora. The Haftarah portions are 2 Kings chapter 4 verse 42 to chapter 5 verse 19 for Tazria, and 2 Kings chapter 7 verse 3 to 20 for Metzora. And the New Testament or Brit Hadashah portions are Luke 7:18 through verse 35 for Tazria, and Matthew 23 verse 16 through 24 verse 2 or 30 and 31. Okay, now in Tazria we're opened with a woman who conceives and gives birth, right? And the Hebrew is very interesting how it is constructed because it highlights the conception, and also the element of giving birth to the seed that is being conceived. And so the concept of marriage and a family and a baby is very beautiful. It's very important and very natural of creation, right? We live it, right? And when we remove ideologies, opinions, nature itself, just like it happens with the rest of creation with animals, etc., humans are also able to create family and bring forth life or become a vehicle of life. And so this beautiful picture of a father, mother, baby. Now when we go into this Torah portion, Tazria, we learn a little something different, right? So we need to learn why is these elements are being explained in the book of Leviticus, right? And why is it so important to understand this concept of impurity and purity, and what does that have to do with the mother, and what does that have to do with skin or scale disease? Okay, and so Parashat Tazria continues the discussion of the laws of purity, right? So now we go from drawing near God and the priest's consecration to what is pure to God, and how can we maintain ourselves pure in His presence. Okay, and so purity and impurity that began earlier with Parashat Tzav. A new mother is regarded as a nida, a menstruant woman. Okay, and it is considered impure, tameh, and regarding the sanctuary for 40 days if is a boy, or 80 days if is a girl. On the 8th day, the life of a boy, he must be circumcised. After the mother's period of impurity had ended, she was required to bring a yearling sheep as a burnt offering and a dove for a sin offering. If she is poor, 2 doves suffice for both offerings. And so, elements of tameh, right? Or tahor, right? And so tameh will be impure, tahor will be pure. And so these concepts, you will see a lot of it also in chapter 11, tameh, tahor. Hebrew elements and words that express what is clean and unclean, okay? And so here, boy 40 days, girl 80 days. Explanation why boys 40, girls 80, understanding what we're going to talk about. Because it is a girl, and the girl will at some point be a mother. There is a representation of her also carrying this 40 day cycle. And so, because it's a girl, female, mother, female, both will do 40 days. Okay, now why? This portion describes the certain afflictions, collectively called za'arat, right? Also talks about za'arat, that cause the affected person or thing, right, to be both ritually impure, tameh, and in the state of uncleanliness, tumma, right? Know that za'arat is not to be identified with leprosy. Right? Some English translations claim, since the symptom of za'arat included not just the afflicted person's skin, but sometimes his clothes, pottery, vessels, and house. Metzora, which is the second Torah portion, cleansing of the leper. As noted, Parashat Tazria explained that if someone was diagnosed with za'arat, leprosy, they were forced to leave the community and live in a state of exile. The afflicted person, called a Metzora, tore his clothes like a mourner, put a shroud over his face, and remained alone. If anyone came near, the person will cry out, "Unclean, stay away, do not become impure because of me." While so isolated, the person would have opportunity to perform teshubah, repentance, and to re-examine his relationship with God. In our second portion, right, this week, Metzora, we learn about the laws of cleansing the leper. If the one suffering from za'arat, Metzora, had apparently been healed, he would first call for the priest to be officially re-examined. If the priest saw no sign of tumah, uncleanliness, a second examination was scheduled 7 days later. And if the Metzora was free from any sign of disease, the process of tahara, purification, will begin. Now, this process of purification is very interesting because when you put the consecration of the priest and the process of purification of a leper, it's the same. Now, before we get started, let's do the Torah blessing. Baruch Adonai Chayora, Baruch Adonai Chayora leolam ba'e, Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim venatan lanu et torato. Baruch Adonai noten chatorah. Blessed Adonai who is blessed, blessed Adonai who is blessed now and is forever. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has chosen us from among the peoples and given us the Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen. So, this week's Torah portion starts the following way. וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור. דבר אל בני ישראל לאמור. אישה כי תצריעה וילדה זכר וטמאה שבעת ימים חימה נידת דותה תטמא. In English, it says the following. So to say to the Israelites, a woman who becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son will be ceremonially unclean for 7 days, just as she is unclean during her monthly period. On the 8th day, the boy is to be circumcised. Then the woman must wait 33 days to be purified from her bleeding. She must not touch anything sacred or go out to the sanctuary until the days of her purification are over. If she gives birth to a daughter for 2 weeks, the woman will be unclean during her period. Then she must wait 66 days to be purified from her bleeding. When the days of her purification for a son or daughter are over, she is to bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a year-old lamb for a burnt offering and a young pigeon or a dove for a sin offering. And he shall offer them before the Lord to make atonement for her. And then she will be ceremonially clean from all her flow of blood. These are the regulations for the woman who gives birth to a boy or a girl. Now, for the Tazria, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when anyone has a swelling or a rash or a shiny spot on their skin that may be defiling his skin disease, they must be brought to Aaron, the priest, or to one who his sons is a priest. The priest is to examine the sore of the skin, and if the hair in the sore has turned white, the sore appears to be more than skin deep. If it is defiling skin disease, when the priest examines the person, he shall pronounce them ceremonially unclean. Now, we're going to bounce back and forth between these two because we're going to go over it a little bit. We have done 2 videos. We did 2 years ago, Tazria Metzora, and last year we did Tazria and Metzora separately. So, we're going to go over some things, but I want you to continue to have this mindset that we have been trying to construct when it comes to the book of Leviticus and understanding the step-by-step process that we're learning to do towards God's presence, okay? So, women who are menstruating are seen as a source of impurity. If this smacks of an ancient superstition against menstrual blood, it most likely is, but only in part. And so, a lot of the information that I get is from books because I'm not that smart. I'm learning. I'm always learning. Like I always tell you, I don't know anything. I just know what I know. So, Jacob Milgram, great commentary. This is obviously the summarized version. There is like 4 volumes, if I'm not mistaken, of this, bigger, but great resource. And also, I always use, obviously, JPS, and I have a couple more in the back. So, it is partly superstition, but in the Bible, the source of the menstruation is a taboo. It lies in a deep commitment to life and is perpetuation. Okay, couldn't say that word. Members of the primitive societies have testified to their researchers that menstrual and local blood, which is the blood that is lost during childbirth, is dangerous to the person. Written sources give testimony that this view was also held by ancients. For instance, the Romans and the pre-Islamic Arabs. It also is recorded as a folk belief in the Talmud. If a menstrual woman passes between 2 men, if it is at the beginning of her menses, she will slay one of them. And if it is at the end of her menses, she will cause strife between them, right? So, in the Israelite mind, blood was the chief symbol of life. Its oozing from the body was no longer the work of demons, but it was certainly the sign of death. In particularly, the loss of seed in vaginal blood was associated with the loss of life. Bleeding or touching blood was not considered polluting, and people who were wounded and bleeding were not defiled and were not forbidden to come to the sanctuary or partake of the sacrifices. So she will go through a process of purification, as we read, and it says now that 40 or 80 days have elapsed, she has brought her requisite sacrifices to the sanctuary. She is purified completely and she is eligible to make contact with sacred objects. Physical impurity, and on the other hand, is eliminated mechanically by the water and sacrifice. The process is automatic. Hence, the verb for purification is in the active construction, and it means is pure. And so, why do I put these two elements here? Because there's the element of superstition. Culturally, ancients believed these elements had to do with demonic possession, spiritual possession, mystic, ancient thoughts, because they couldn't control them. So they didn't have an answer for why they happened and what they meant. So they had these mystic representations and trains of thought when it came to the blood and what it represented, especially on a woman, and also personal discharge from reproductive systems. All these things, they were connected to demons and evil spirits. In the case of the person being cursed, the woman or the man, and in the scale disease also, and they were excluded. They were marginalized from the community because of these things. They were not explainable, and so in this case, they were possessed by demons. So you cannot be near us. And so here, God is starting to teach Israel that all these natural elements that do happen to the body have certain rhymes and reasons for them, right? And they do not exclude them from the community, and they do not exclude them from having a relationship with God. But as we're learning, there's order, right? And even though they are not sins, they are impurities. And so God is holy. What is holy? He's set apart. So God is trying to help us draw near him in purity and cleanliness, because that is order. And remember, blood and all these elements are used specifically in specific areas. They're not used freely to be put on the walls, to be put on, it's put in specific areas with specific representations, dictating or representing your complete dedication or forgiveness of sin. Right, and usually not all the blood is used. It is poured on the side of the altar. And so here God is trying to teach us order and cleanliness, and letting the woman understand that this is what's happening is something natural. It's happening and it's normal, right? She is not in moral sin against God. She is impure to come to the presence. And why? Because ancient people will see her in her childbirth after moment, and they will consider her demon possessed, or they will consider that evil spirits are possessing her. And God is saying, okay, we're not going to associate this with my sanctuary, and we're going to protect your honor and your dignity. And they will teach the community to understand that this is something natural, and until you are clean and you are able to recuperate, then you can draw near me, right? And be grateful for this life that has been able to come to this world through you. Okay? So, blood that has come out when it comes to obviously menstrual cycle and childbirth is considered as loss of life. That blood is representation of death, because it's something that is being lost in the process of exiting the body. Okay, I hope that is making sense, right? So the blood itself is life, but the element of the loss of blood in the case of this situation is blood that is representing death. Okay, now it's very contradicting, because there's a life that is coming which is pure and clean, but there is uncleanliness in the process. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, put it in the comment section. Now, the initial problem we face faces the priest when it comes to the Metzora or the Zarat was to determine whether the sufferer had an acute Zarat or some less acute ailment with which it might be confused, but which would heal. Okay, if the initial examination did not immediately reveal symptoms of acute Zarat, the person was held for further observations for 2 successive periods of 7 days. The text describes the symptoms and prescribes the procedure to be followed. Acute Zarat is indicated by a with discoloration of the body hair in the infected areas of the skin and by lesions or lesions that appear to be receded or lower than the surrounding skin. If after 7 days the lesions do not become enlarged, and if within 14 days the hair in the infected area reverts to more normal, darker color, a determination may be made that the infection is not acute Zarat. Otherwise, further quarantine is imposed. If the rash continues to spread, the person is considered to have acute Zarat and is declared impure indefinitely. Okay? Now, understanding this very summarized portion, right? Because we talked about mother gives birth, Zarat, to either scale disease, which is chronic, something that is happening in the skin physically, or something that is imposed, right? And so traditionally, the Zarat that is imposed, which is the acute, is the one that is imposed and is connected to Lashon Hara, right? You are hiding something that you are speaking or that you're thinking or that you are doing, and what is reflected, because nobody else knows, what is going to be reflected is on your skin. And so the priest has to determine either are you in the process of hiding your sin, or are you in a chronic, ailment in your skin. And so that's why the examination is very important. If the skin is called impure indefinitely, is because what is happening is that it's spreading because you're not recognizing, right? Understanding the concept of Lashon Hara and why this is marked in your skin. And we see it with Moses' sister Miriam. When she speaks against Moses behind his back, she turns full white and she is excluded from the camp, right? Until there is repentance. So what we have learned is that Genesis 1:1 to Genesis 2:3 establishes what is good in God's eye, which is creation, and he puts everything in order, and he rests and he reigns, right? And so we learn that the building of the tabernacle is a representation, micro representation of that garden, and everything in the tabernacle is ordered. And we have to slowly learn to gradually come back to the garden. But God has put a representation of the garden in the middle of the camp so that we are able to learn and understand what does God desire. How do we maintain ourselves in the garden? How do we draw near the garden, right? How do we extend the garden, right? So order, okay? Now, outside the tabernacle, in this case, right, because we understand that they sinned, so the tabernacle is not necessarily in the middle of the camp. We're going to call it common area, okay? So you see the rectangular area, red? This common area can be extended in the camp and out farther, right? Because in the representation of this is Israel is the vehicle, but the reality is that Adam, right, humanity draws near God, right? We go back to the garden. And so we learn how to draw near through the sacrifices. Each sacrifice represents a specific intention of approach to the deity. The priests become the mediation, right? That intermediary between me and the deity, and between the deity and me. And now we're learning about purity. What can I eat which maintain myself permanently pure or impure, or what I personally as creation do or happens to me naturally that will cause me to be impure, not in sin, not in moral sin, but impure, right? Because ancients believed that menstrual blood, lochial blood, which is the blood that is lost when giving birth, discharge from reproductive organs, male and female, skin disease, and the fabric mold or transfer of zarat were all connected to demons and evil spirits. So now God is going to bring order again, right? He's trying to restructure us, redesign us, and help us understand to find balance. There's no extremes, but we have to understand that we need to represent him over the nations. So don't fear the natural blood that is lost, the natural liquids that come out of the reproductive system, the skin disease if it's chronic, because if it's not, if it's zarat, then you need to inspect your heart. So all of these things, at least in these two Torah portions, zarat and Metzora, and the closing of last week's Torah portion with the clean foods and unclean animals, are trying to help us understand that this space is sacred. The tabernacle is sacred, and it requires holiness and purity. Holiness means that we are set apart, not that we hide away from the world, but no, we separate ourselves from what is common. What the world considers common, we separate ourselves so that way we can make a difference. Because if we're assimilated, then we're just more of the same. And God doesn't want us to be more of the same. He wants us to draw near in recognition that he's holy and pure. And so, the ancients believed this. And God is teaching us that none of these have any power over us. That there's impurities. That as long as we keep our hearts clean, because if we don't have our hearts clean and we're speaking deceitfully, it will show in our bodies. But if we have scale disease, or if we have seminal discharges or lochial discharges, or for the women, also menstrual blood, all these things are natural, and they make them impure, unclean, which is considerable. If you have ever been in a situation where a woman gives birth, as my wife, it's unclean, right? It's a beautiful moment. Life is brought to the world, but it's not the most cleanliness thing that you watch. And there is a process of recuperation. And so God is trying to help us be wise and understanding that he created this. Right? He created us. He designed us. And the reason why we are in the stage that we are so far away from his presence is because we chose it, or in the case Adam chose it. But we don't help when we don't apply ourselves to learn, to study, to seek his will before ours, to seek his desires before ours. Okay? And so, the desire for God is to help us get closer to his presence. And little by little, we're learning that sacrificial system, priest, impurities are the things that either draw us near or keeps us away. And as long as we're obedient, we will always have access. No demons, no nothing can keep us away from God as long as we are obedient. Now, we're going to close out with this. Exodus 15 verse 26 says, he said, if you listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, I will not bring on you any of the disease I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. He is the one that heals, he's the one that purifies, and he's the one that restores. All we have to do is obey. So, hope you learned something new. And if you didn't, I'm sorry. I hope that you were able to review. I don't know anything. I just know what I know. And I appreciate you for listening. So, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. And Shavua Tov. And a wonderful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.